Can I remind you this meeting is being recorded, and therefore what you say tonight will be in the public domain. Thank you. Before we commence on the agenda, I've got one announcement to make. It's to introduce you to our newly appointed Director of Finance, Beck Mayer. Here she is. I'm sure she'll enjoy her opportunities working here with such a wonderful bunch of people, and I wish her the very best of luck. Moving on to the agenda items. Item 1, minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of the 7th, 23. Is it your wish that I sign those as a true and accurate record? Okay. Item 2. Do we have any apologies, Carol?
Yes, I've received apologies from councillors Bond, Chapman and Jackson.
Are there any more from the floor? No. Moving on. Do we have any declarations of interest, please? None declared? Okay, moving on again. Item 4, the Council's medium-term financial strategy 2024-25, etc. Could I ask Councillor Lees to introduce this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members. I'd like to present the Council's medium-term financial strategy for 24-25 to 28-29 and the 24-25 budget outlook and indicative figures and move with the recommendation at 2.1 and 2.2. The budget for 24-25 and the MTFS for 24-25 to 28-29 will be formulated on best knowledge and understanding of a number of external factors and internal decisions around costing, priorities and service provision. There is continual levels of uncertainty. The medium-term financial strategy, which is known as the MTFS, puts in place a strategic approach to the planning of the Council's resources and provides the framework for the planning of the Council's revenue and capital spending each year via the annual budget. The MTFS, once approved, will cover the 5 years 24-25 to 28-29 and highlight various financial challenges facing the Council over this period. The underlying economic context remains challenging. There is great uncertainty in relation to local government funding ahead of the next general election, which will be on or before January next year. 25, I should say, not next year, and perhaps for a year following the election of new administration. And beyond that, however, local government funding remains uncertain. There are 4 parameters outside the control of the South Council that could potentially have a material impact on the finances of the Council, these being the level of interest rates, the level of inflation, the local government finance settlement, and the significant economic development within the locality. I will now ask our Finance Manager, John Mayhew, to take us through the details. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Lees. And good evening, members. Bringing tonight to open scrutiny a budget overview and indicative figures for the next medium-term financial strategy. A number of members in the room will have attended the finance training presentation back in May, in which the financial cycle across the calendar year was outlined to members. Members will recall that the autumn months in particular that we came up to were the period when the detailed work in particular is carried out of the next year's budgets. Even at this early stage, however, as officers, we are aware of the broad financial climate, and as outlined by Councillor Lees, we're able to distinguish between factors that can impact upon the budget that are inside of our control and others which may have a material impact but are outside of our control. With detailed work on the former ongoing, this report is focused on some significant items of which we as a council have no direct influence, but we are nevertheless aware they will have significant impact and bearing on our financial position going forward. It is to be stressed, however, at this stage, the numbers shown are merely indicative. There remains, again as outlined by Councillor Lees, considerable uncertainty, and coupled with the detailed work that officers are completing on the budgets, there is no doubt these numbers will alter between now and the MTFS coming forward in the new year. However, what we can do is paint a picture of the broad outlook that would present perhaps the best, the worst, and what we deem to be a most likely scenario across the significant items outlined by Councillor Lees. And we can give a general outlook of how the budget might appear in what we consider at the moment to be the most likely scenario. In terms of the factors presented, the interest rates have been well documented to members over a couple of years now, this council. And a couple of years ago, when we set the budget, we had no expectation at all of raising money from our balances. That improved considerably last year, and there's been ongoing improvement still, with interest rates now around about the 5.5% mark. We can build that with some certainty into our budgets going forward. Inflation remains a big risk factor and an unknown, but we continue to take the best advice available from our economic advisors in terms of how we set our budgets and the contracts to make sure we fully account for inflation risks that may appear. The fair funding review and government financing is perhaps the single biggest item of uncertainty. The fair funding review was something on the table when I first came into post, which is now over 5 years ago. And it's been consistently put back by central government for a number of factors. And with a general election on the horizon, the only thing I think we could say with certainty is there will be one before January 2025, when we don't know, but we know there will be one. What we can infer from that is that the actual date of the fair funding review is certainly unlikely, or is almost certainly not going to take place before a general election. And with other priorities for a new administration, whatever administration might be, we can presume the fair funding review and the impact it might have can be delayed further. Our advisors are now talking to local councils. They can expect a minimum of 2 years and possibly as many as 3 years from 24-25 before a fair funding review looking at how local government finance is organised to come around into fruition. And that does have a big impact on our accounts, because up until that time, our advisors told us to take the most prudent approach, which had always been assuming that a fair funding review, when it comes about, could mean money taken away from district councils, and we budgeted that accordingly. So each occasion when we can push back date at which that fair funding review might take place, we can bring more resources into the medium-term financial strategy that weren't previously available to us. And there's another factor around business rates that's very important too, particular to this council, around investments in the local area, particularly around the West Midlands interchange, and particularly around the old Royal Ordnance area around Featherstone. We can anticipate as a number of businesses may well be moving into those areas over the course of the next 3 years. And where previously we may have shown the date that they start could have been overtaken by a fair funding review, for the first time now, with some confidence, we think at least in the first year, we start getting some business rate receipts from those businesses that may move into those areas, we will be able to reap the benefits from those business rate receipts, which is an assumption we weren't previously able to make with any confidence before. And we will continue to take the best available advice to us, available to the council as the budgets are constructed. So what does this mean in terms of the very early indicative figures? In table 2, paragraph 5.3 in the report, when contrasted against the medium-term financial strategy position presented in February 23, there is a potential for a much healthier position to be presented. If we take a medium-term, most likely position around interest rates, around the latest fair funding, and the onset of additional business rate income that we can benefit from, we could be in a position to present a near balanced budget around about 2026-27, having previously presented a deficit in those years, and potentially move to a surplus position to start replenishing reserves around about the 27-28 timeframe. I continue to emphasise, however, these figures are very much indicative. Outside events, as we know, can change quickly and can alter the assumptions that we need to make. And there'll be a considerable amount of work also taken out by officers and accountants on the underlying detail around the budgets where we do have influence over the upcoming weeks. Finally, I'll draw members' attention to the timetable that's outlined in section 6 of this report. So overview and scrutiny can be assured that a draft MTFS will be published in detail for discussion by overview and scrutiny in January 24, in line with the timetables that we've operated in previous years. Thank you again, Chairman. I'll be very happy to answer any questions members may have.
Thank you for that presentation. Do we have any questions, please? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, John, for the presentation and the information you've sent out. I do realise it's best guessing. In view of the difficulties that county councils are having at the moment with their budgets, is there any whisper or straw in the wind that says that district councils may have to adopt more responsibilities themselves? I'm looking at our very good financially viable case, and I'm wondering now whether, because the embarrassment of the counties and the unitary authorities, that more responsibilities may be handed down. I wondered if you've got any information about that.
Thank you, Councillor. Excellent question. I think I'm not aware of any whispers at all of any extra responsibilities that we may have. Big unknown, I can come back to, is the fair funding review going further down the line. And one of the reasons we prudently budget, I think, is the other side, if you like, the possibility that resources may be redirected in the direction which you talk about to counties, unitary authorities. We don't know. And that's one of the reasons we've been prudently budgeting for the fair funding review as and when it might come along, and why it's to our benefit every year that appears to be delayed. But come back to your question, when we talk about the whispers, we keep our ears as close to the ground as we possibly can to pick up all the best knowledge and all the best advice we get as we construct the budgets, just to make sure our own budgets are prudently catered for. We're not embarrassed. And I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, John. Any further questions? Councillor Harrison.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that. Just seeking to understand a little bit more about the whole process of what you've done, because I suspect that this is the tip of the iceberg in terms of the work that's gone into this. In fact, I'm sure it's the tip of the iceberg. So, just looking at your best case, worst case scenarios, which I kind of understand what the rationale is for choosing those, although obviously inflation and interest rates tend to move in the same direction rather than opposite directions, which would be very, very unusual in historical terms, because it just doesn't really usually happen that way. But what would be nice to know, I think, is you've got your best worst case scenarios, you've got your indicative position, the sort of midpoint, if you like, neutral position. What's the impact of your worst case and best case scenario? What would those numbers look like with the modelling that I'm sure you've done to some extent around that? It would just help me understand how much I need to worry or how well I can sleep at night. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Again, very good question. I want to emphasise this point, the numbers are very, very indicative. And it's a huge risk as we presented all the numbers that it could create significant fears. The one thing we've done in our medium-term financial strategies every single year, and we will continue to do it this year, is when we come to the detailed report take over scrutiny, we do include some sensitivity analysis amongst the budgets we present. So whilst we won't ask members to vote on 3 budgets, there'll be a position upon which the council tax is set that members get the opportunity to approve as they see fit. We do present some tables in that report that goes into exactly the question you ask around these are the most significant risk factors, usually around business rates, have been in the past. There might be other factors around interest inflation that we could consider are more significant. So at that point, members will see the detail of this is a worst case scenario we could envisage. And this is what the impact would be on the 5 years going forward in the event of that worst case scenario taking place. And likewise, because occasionally, quite rightly, members have questioned, are we painting too black a picture in the medium-term financial strategy? We've also outlined the other side of the sensitivity analysis, that if things turned out really rosy and good events came to pass, this is how good it could look. And Whilst not going to go into too much detail, if you were to go back to last year's medium-term financial strategy, I think that again, that would paint the situations aren't that much dissimilar in terms of the worst case from that. So there's nothing that's occurred that means members need to worry over and above positions that are presented in February last year. But with so much broad uncertainty, that's the reason why I think we just presented one set of figures this afternoon. And I hope that answers your question, Councillor Harrison. Thank you.
Do you have any further questions? No? Does anybody wish to debate it? No? Okay, thank you. There is a recommendation on page 5, which is 2.1. It is recommended that the overview and scrutiny note the broad economic and external climate that could precipitate the best, worst and likeliest scenarios presented. And 2.2, overview and scrutiny to also note the potential impact of identified and provisionally costed external factors on the general funds of the council, notwithstanding that these are indicative and internal policy prioritisation remains ongoing. Are we all content with that? Thank you. Moving on to item 5, it's members' update on climate change actions. And Councillor Kath Perry, do you want to present this?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much. Just to say that we've got officers here that may be able to answer any questions that you might have. This is just an update. So, you know, I'm going to hand over now to Annette. To you, Annette. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. So this evening what we wanted to do was just highlight some of the successes that we've had in the last couple of years in terms of climate change and where we are compared to where we started in terms of monitoring our carbon footprint. And I think what I won't say too much this evening. I'm going to hand you over to Ryan, who's got a presentation which effectively sets out the detail in the report and let him explain that in more detail. I think what's important to say is that obviously following the declaration of a climate emergency back in 2020, we published our climate change strategy and we have made significant strides since that time. There is still work to do and Ryan is going to take us through that now. So hopefully Ryan's had the opportunity to get his presentation ready and I'll hand you over to Ryan. Thank you.
Thank you, Annette, and thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. Thank you. Just let my screen catch up a bit. Doesn't look good. Isn't technology great when it works? That's great. Try again, thank you. For those members that don't know me, I'm Ryan Taylor. I'm the Performance and Climate Change Manager at South Staffordshire Council. So in the next few slides, I'm going to be talking very briefly around the achievements we have made in the fields of climate change and also touch upon some of the work we've got coming up in the coming years, which we're sure members will be involved with. So, as you'll be aware, we do have a climate change strategy in place in the council that sits just beneath the council plan. And obviously it feeds into the main drivers of the council plan around prosperous communities and vibrant communities. The climate change strategy, we're tackling this through 4 main strands, really. You can't quite read the 4th one there. Bear with me, that's better. So we're trying to tackle it around 4 strands. What we're doing to raise awareness of climate change issues for our partners and residents. Our strategic planning responsibilities around climate change. What we're doing to influence partners around the issue. And last but by no means least, what we're doing in terms of our own carbon footprints and council operations. So talking through each of these in turn, I'll talk through a bit of the achievements from the year 2022 to 23. Right, so in terms of raising awareness, members will be aware of during 22 we hosted the South Staffordshire Climate Change Festival, which was primarily a way of means to sort of badge our activities really, promote awareness, engagement through social media, through the review and outreach to the residents. During that time, we engaged with schools across the district. We hosted 2 climate youth committees with 6 schools. And, you know, my personal thanks to the members who joined us on those days and got involved in lively debate. We've continued that conversation with schools and are still working with high schools such as Chesley and Hay Academy, London Invictus, who've asked us back to sort of get involved in their own youth committees on climate change to discuss these issues with their students. We're partnering up with an organisation called Beat the Cold, which is primarily focused on delivering energy saving advice to residents across the district to understand how our more vulnerable residents can make energy savings. On a practical point of view, we've distributed over £4,000 worth of funding to little climate projects across the district as part of our climate prize. We've funded 21 projects across each of the 5 localities, and these have ranged from the sort of things you'd expect around climate change, such as tree planting and biodiversity, but we've also supported green and active travel projects down in Kimber, and also things like the Buildbrook Repair Cafe, which is hosted at the Village Hall, which, you know, from that seed funding we've given that, they've gone on to make a great success and sort of hosted, I think they've got their 4th event coming up in October, which gives an indication of sort of that bit of funding that we give to these community projects and how it can sort of roll on to bigger and better things. Members will also be aware we've published an information pack for residents and businesses regarding the climate emergency, and that's just to sort of illustrating what we're doing and how residents and businesses can get involved. So in terms of our strategic planning work, I mean, obviously the local plan is on hold, but we're continuing the work around what biodiversity net gain, what that might mean for the district. And I'm working with our senior ecologists to sort of understand what opportunities there might be to sort of support funding of our own green spaces going forward through this work. We are, you know, where possible, we'll be hoping to build carbon-friendly development measures within the emerging local plan. And as a council, we are leading on the county-wide approach to sort of planning policy around sort of carbon ambitions through the planning frameworks. Do excuse me. So, in terms of influencing partners and how we're getting our partners involved in this conversation, we're part of the South Staffordshire County Council Sustainability Board, so that's all the district councils coming together to ensure a sort of county-wide approach to sustainability and climate change issues. We're feeding into that. We've hosted a number of business and networking events, both off our own back through and in partnership with this Staffordshire Business Environment Network, if I got that right, and also through partnerships with local landowners such as the Bradford Estates, and getting all businesses involved in this conversation. We are continuing to engage with the Kingswood Trust, which is one of our key partners, and we've hosted a couple of climate events over there. They're demonstrating their own environmental projects on site, and we're also helping support that through our own social responsibility, staff volunteering out there to sort of build on that partnership approach. We continue in the conversation with parish councils, community and friends groups, so we can understand what's going on in the district. As many of you will know, I've been out to a number of parish councils to talk about climate change issues and understand what is going on within localities. As part of that, carbon awareness training, we're looking to offer that out to parish councils. I'll be plugging that event that we'll be holding the parish summit coming up in October. And I'll talk a bit more about carbon awareness training perhaps in the next slide. We're working with businesses to support carbon initiatives through the Staffordshire Business Environment Network, and also for the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, we're looking to install PV panels on our own estate and sort of offer that energy saving out to our own tenants and residents. So, I'll talk very briefly in terms of council operations. So, members should be very proud of the fact that we are continuing to reduce the carbon footprint of the council in terms of our own operations. Since we started reporting this back in 2010, this is hot off the press, we've got the figures together, it's 43% decrease in our total carbon footprint. I'll be talking a bit more on the next slide about that. Members will also be aware we've installed solar panel EV charging on our top car park for tenants to use, and that's in addition to the public car charging points that we have just outside the hub down on the bottom car park. We are continuing to work with landowners, partners, and through our key partnership with the Forest of Mercia to facilitate tree planting across the district. A very conservative estimate, there was at least 1,000 trees planted last year by the Forest of Mercia in partnership with local groups. And yeah, we hope to be able to build on that and continue that work going forward. And finally, as I say, around carbon awareness training. So this is something we've been delivering internally to members, and indeed a few of you will remember the training session that we had before the election. We've offered that, we've delivered that to the corporate leadership team and hope to roll it out to staff during the coming year or so. And really that's helping our staff and members to sort of consider climate change issues and sort of help aid that decision-making process that we all go through. So I'll talk a bit more about the carbon footprint of South Staffordshire Council. Now, in the report, I mentioned that there was a 37% decrease. That was based on last year's figures. We've now done a bit more work around that, 39. Sorry, but we now estimate it's around a 43% decrease that we've got. Now, the big decreases we've seen recently are primarily due to a change to green energy at the hub. So, yeah, it's things move and change around these triggers as well. Yeah, we've seen a decrease in energy usage here on site. We've also seen an increase in our carbon footprint through mileage on the BIFA contract. That's primarily due to sort of investment in the fleet there and more developments and sort of more vehicles around the district. We have also seen a slight increase in staff mileage as we're perhaps more and more getting back to sort of business as usual from pre-COVID days. And I think the key message really for members here is we are doing well, we have done well, but it's going to be more and more difficult in the future to reduce this carbon footprint further. You know, a lot of the lower hanging fruit, so to speak, has already been taken. But, you know, there'll be some key decisions coming forward really around our carbon footprint. So to help facilitate that conversation, we have been working with an external consultant to look at our monitoring against best practice and national guidance. Now, we recognise there's a few bits of reporting we could do with expanding upon really. And that's around some of the carbon emissions that are not necessarily owned or controlled by us, but nonetheless form part of what we do. And I use the examples of the leisure centres and baggages and the cemetery sites. Just by opening the gates there every day, we have a carbon footprint of the activities that take place on site. We might not be able to do much about it in practice, but yeah, we should be at least measuring and sort of understanding this impact. We also have, you know, a carbon footprint associated with our leased assets and sites across the district that in various sort of parts of ownership. We have to understand employee commuting, how our employees are travelling across the district and what they're doing in terms of carbon footprint, and also around procurement and purchase goods and how we can build that in. Now, as I say, it is perhaps key to understand this. We can make exclusion statements if we don't believe they're necessarily applicable to what we do. But you know, I always maintain it's important to measure and understand where possible before looking to reduce that carbon footprint and finally offsetting. I think in the coming year, we'll be looking at a bit more of a detailed plan around this about what may be achievable, but also, you know, if members are keen for us to move towards net zero, what does that look like in terms of options and costed details for the district? So I'll just update members as well on a few key projects we are looking at. In terms of EV provision across the district, I've already been in touch with you all about the bid that we're working on with the county council around through the Levi funding. Yeah, I'm pleased to say the county have confirmed that they've been successful in their application now. So we can expect some sort of funding towards EV infrastructure across the district for residents. And really that's all built around sort of helping break down those challenges some residents may have with charging the electric vehicle at home and making it easy for them to adopt new technology. We are also looking at working with an external consultant to understand what we can do for visitors to the district on some of our sites, commercial estates, sites like Bagridge, how we might be able to roll out EV charging there. Now, again, that's a bit of an early stage. We have identified the sites and the proposals have been drawn up. We're looking into the procurement route to that at the minute, and members can expect more detailed paper around that to be coming forward. Green travel, railway walk, and also the Worley Essington Canal, as I mentioned in the report. We think there's a key opportunity here to develop our own sites and maximise the opportunities for green travel for residents and visitors to the district. I've only illustrated the railway walk here, but the Worley Essington Canal in the north has got equally good links from the villages down into the conurbation. And really, we're keen to understand what the art of the possible might be here. Looking to get some funding through the UK Shared Prosperity Fund to fully work up a master plan and costings and proposed phasings for these works, so we can sort of start to bite away as a complete project. We understand, you know, there's key partners we could get to the table here: Wolverhampton Council, Dudley Council, even Sustrans and stuff in the county council. We've started to have some conversations around understanding what we can do. There is a working officers group that we're setting up. And again, we'll be bringing more details of this to members as and when we sort of get the firmer proposals built up. So, how to take all this forward, really? Many of you will be here in this room will have invites to the members' working group on climate change that will be starting next week. And the key bit for that really for us will be to sort of refresh the strategy and action plan for the coming year and ensure it's fit for purpose. So this is a very sort of draft work in progress at the minute, but the sort of things we'd like to be discussing with members to understand priorities. And that's around our carbon audit and how that factors into sort of arms of the strategy, outreach and awareness, assets and estates, active travel, operations, procurement, planning strategy, and no doubt many more. And from that, we'll be looking to draw up an action plan working around how we can reduce the carbon footprint of what we do, how we can offset that carbon footprint, and finally also sort of mitigate the effects of climate change on a practical level within the district for our residents. And again, personally, I'm looking forward to working with those members on that working group. So I think that's it in terms of a quick whistle-stop presentation around achievements and what we've been up to. Happy to take questions and also take the opportunity to promote carbon awareness training at the Parish Summit. If you please do invite your parish councils to get involved in that one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, members. Thank you, Ryan, for that presentation. Councillor Kinsey, I'm told you were first with your hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. Quite eager on this one. Ryan, thank you to you, to Annette, to Mark, everybody involved in this discussion. Frankly, long term, or perhaps in the longest term, it's the most important issue we face. I've got 3 questions I just want to sort of throw at you, some more detail than others. The first one is on trees that you mentioned in your report, Ryan, and the planting that we're doing. It has been mentioned to me by residents in the past who may be a little aggrieved for whatever reason, don't feel that tree planting is going on fast enough. Obviously, so much of South Staffordshire already benefits from substantial tree coverage, you know, so in that sense, we're naturally ahead already. And certainly in my patch, when you look at old photos of Womben, there wasn't a tree in sight, particularly along the railway walk. Now there are loads there. So nature has managed to do that over the last 40 years or so. But there is this idea that we're not going fast enough. The rest of South Staffs, the majority of it is taken up by farmland. What can we do to encourage more land to come forward that is appropriate for trees? Because not everybody is comfortable for instance, converting farmland or whatever for tree coverage. How can we promote that? So that's number one. Number two is specifically relates to street scenes. So we've had an awful lot of talk about moving to electric vehicles and vehicle charging. How is street scene getting on at the minute? Are you investigating this? Are we actively seeking electric appliances as part of the kit we use? For instance, whether it's electric trimmers or whatever, or even mowers that help to reduce our carbon footprint further. And then finally, just one that's really interesting to me, because it affects my patch in particular, is the railway walk. I think this is really, really exciting. I've had conversations with Annette as corporate director previously on a ward walk. My question about that is prior to this meeting, we had a presentation about a significant piece of infrastructure. It's going to take an incredibly long time, and likewise, this is going to take a while to happen. In the meantime, can we make sure, and how can we make sure we do this most effectively? Reporting, making sure residents are aware of what is going on and the developments and opportunities that are going to be provided by that important piece of infrastructure, green infrastructure, when it actually does come forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Kinsey. I'll take your first question around trees. I mean, we work with an organisation called the Forest of Mercia, who offer fully funded tree planting and maintenance, which is about as good as you're going to get really in terms of sort of the tree planting options. We have probably sort of been around most of our sites now, so we are running out of new tree planting sites on our own estate, and I've been trying to do a lot of work with sort of local landowners and stuff. It is difficult to get the message out there. I've had some conversations with the NFU myself, but they've not really got very far. I must say, a lot of farmers are sort of unwilling to turn over chunks of their land to tree planting at the minute, perhaps understandably, really. But I suppose I'd answer it really saying, we're always looking for the opportunities to work with partners. If members do come across any of your sort of network of colleagues out there in the district who would like to get involved, please send them our way and we can sort of look into that one for you. I think Mark was going to take the second question.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Kinsey. In terms of the street scene fleet, in terms of the numbers John's spoke about tonight, one of the things we're looking at as part of the budget setting process is putting options forward in terms of the future fleet for the council. There's no capital in the budget currently for fleet, so we need to look at how we fund that going forward, but what options we consider. Again, we are a rural district, and some of the options other councils use in more urban settings are appropriate there, but they're not necessarily appropriate for a rural district. Some of that technology hasn't been tried and tested, and it might not be the best options. And again, one of the things we need to consider is electric the best option at this point in time. In terms of council operations, one of the big areas for us to look at is fleet, not just on street scene, but the waste fleet going forward. There's significant expenses attached to that, so it's careful consideration we need to make as a council, but we will be looking at the options for the fleet. And again, through conversations recently, what we don't want to do is a Betamax and go down electric when actually hydrogen or HVO are better options. So it's going too soon and not making those mistakes, but at some point we've got to look at the climate impact as well. But we do need to bring options forward on the fleet, and that will be coming forward, Councillor Kinsley, as part of this year's budget.
So just to add to Mark's comments on that one as well, specifically around electric tools, we are sort of steadily changing our tools over to electric where we can. And this is mainly on a sort of replacement basis, and so we're gradually trying to phase out the sort of petrol and sort of diesel streamers. Your third question, Councillor Kinsey, was around the railway walk. I think in that the first stage for that for us there really is to get a costed options of what might be possible, and then understand how we might phase the works really. And then once we've got that sort of idea, then we can start going out to residents and sort of talking to them a bit more about what we might be looking to achieve in the coming years there. I hope that answers your general points. I don't believe miss anything now. Frantically scribbling my notes.
No, thank you, Mark, and thank you, Chairman. I think that that answers my questions. I'm happy with that. And the most important thing to come out of that from me is, regardless of where we are, you're talking and you're thinking about it, and that's really important. The effort is going in. Thank you, Chairman.
Annette, did you want to come back on something?
Yeah, I was just really just to reiterate, and I think that's the key question really, in terms of the what we're seeing this evening, in terms of the great strides that we've made, and the 40% is really 43% reduction is quite significant. But I think obviously Ryan talks about the picking the low hanging fruit, and now it is going to get more difficult for some of those decisions that we're going to have to make. And I think that's the crux of certainly the next year in terms of our role, trying to identify what those are. So I think the role of the working group over the next sort of month is going to be critical in terms of scoping that, because there will be some decisions to be made in relation to how do we go far, how do we accelerate that and accelerate it at pace. And clearly there will be some decisions to be made, and there's cost implications, but we need to be aware of what they are before we can have those detailed conversations, I think. With that regard, I think in terms of the railway walk, I think I don't think anybody would say it's not something we want to be exploring. We're really positive in terms of the conversations that we're having in that facilitating role that we have for both Wombourne and for the identified scheme in the north as well, and therefore it gives us an opportunity through our partners and through the partnership working that we've got to bring that to the front. But you're absolutely right, it will take, hopefully not quite the 15 years that it's going to take for the WMI to be completed, but it will take time to do that. But we may need to do that in phases, but I think I should say the communication of that something's happening, and that we can demonstrate that to our communities is going to be critical. And that's, again, you can see that's one of our points in terms of this strategy. It's about influencing partners and communicating it.
Right, thank you for that. Councillor Christopher Evans.
Thank you for your presentation. It is an important area to look at, and pretty much a race against time. I'm just wondering, you quoted in your presentation that you'd factored in staff mileage changing. I was just wondering how more home working had been factored in. And you've mentioned mileage changes, but have you factored in changes like if the house would otherwise have been empty, if someone was working from home and now it's occupied and it's a cold winter's day and the heating's on, that kind of stuff, how has that been factored into the workings? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Evans. I suppose the answer is that's something we need to look at really in terms of our total footprint. At the moment, we take a fairly sort of broad approach to it. We report back on the council, the staff mileage that's reported back through sort of site visits and stuff throughout the year by staff. We report that back through this process to members. But we recognise, there is a secondary side to that. It's the cost of folk coming into the offices in the first place, or the cost of folks sort of the carbon footprint of the folk working from homes. Again, it's everything we do has a carbon footprint of some sort. You may be able to reduce some of it. We may have to live with some of it, and either option is admirable to approach really. But it's just getting that understanding of it all. That is something we need to look a bit more detail of to understand our total carbon footprint really. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen.
Thank you. Three things, please. Firstly, there is not a safe cycle or walking route between Purton and Codsall. And this is something that impedes school travel MPs residents who wish to come into this centre and their access. And I think that's something which we need to look at across the district, where our young people need to get to school or to college or wherever they're going safely. Secondly, we are looking currently for solar panels for our civic centres, and at the moment we are applying. Is this UK Shared Prosperity Fund open to that kind of use? Thirdly, in our village, Sainsbury's and Marston Breweries own the public car parks. What approaches are being made to the businesses on public car parks, EV charging? Thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor Allen. I've noted your comments around the sort of Purton, Codsall lack of a cycle route there. And obviously, I would agree with you. Yes, and walking. I think what we're looking to achieve, say with the railway walking with the Essington Canal, is both of these sites are completely within South Staffordshire's ownership and remit. So it is an opportunity for us to do something here with these sites. Yeah, I acknowledge there's a lot more could be done across the district, but it involves a sort of group of the key partners really, including the county council there. So I have no real answer to that one, but we'll certainly note it. In terms of solar panels to the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, I don't know the answer myself, but I certainly know officers who would go that one. So if it's okay, Vanessa may be able to jump in on that one, actually. I'll pass it over.
Yeah, so there is potentially funding within the UK Shared Prosperity Fund for some elements of that. We'd have to check the eligibility criteria, but there is also other funds available as well. So maybe we can have a conversation to see if we can identify those. In terms of the conversations with businesses, particularly some of the businesses that have got big car parks, we are running, you may well have seen on some of our press notices regarding the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and some of the launches of some of the funds that we've got. One of them is a Green Solutions fund, which may well be able to provide for green technology for the businesses and to help encourage businesses and customers to use green technology. So alongside that, there could be opportunity to do that. Obviously, if it's a larger business, they may well have other mechanisms to engage in any case, but that's one of the things that we want to be looking at doing, is encouraging all types of businesses, big and small, to apply for the fund that we've got available through the UK Shared, but also in terms of encouraging particularly some of those bigger ones, to be able to have those conversations and bring some of that forward alongside the key piece of work that we're doing with the county in relation to EV charging.
Councillor Spruce, did you indicate? No. Councillor Kelly?
Thank you, Chair. To Ryan, the key point I want to make is you've got swathes of land off Woolgarston Way that runs right adjacent to the M6. We have mentioned many times before that could have plenty of trees planted there, for a lot of trees that will cut the carbon footprint, not only of Penkridge, but for South Staffordshire, as well as a stakeholder being the national highways of the A449. If you've got more trees planted on that section, that would help cut the carbon footprint as well.
Thanks for that, Councillor Kelly. Yeah, we're more than happy to look at that one. As part of our sort of tree survey work anyway, we're also doing a bit of work alongside that to sort of identify possible areas for future tree planting that we haven't come across yet. And I'll certainly put that one forward. Thank you.
Councillor Dufty.
Thank you, and thanks Ryan for the presentation. I've got 3 questions.
First of all, sort of following on from what Councillor Allen said about Purton, Kimber, of course, we've got so many country lanes. We're really reliant on cars in Kimber because it's not safe to walk on a lot of the country lanes and to cycle, although some of the keen cyclists would beg to differ. It certainly isn't safe for children to easily get to school unless they live within the central zone of Kimber. And we lack public transport as an option. So I'm wondering if there's any work that might be going on in that area. And I'm sure we're not the only village in that circumstance. I mean, if we look at Enville, that it's even harder for them. Tying into that, I'd also like a little bit more information on the green and active travel project that you mentioned in Kimber, because I wasn't aware of that, and you know, maybe that's something that links in to that point. Secondly, do we have or are you collecting any data on the use of EV charging points that we currently have across the district? Maybe starting with the points that you've got here. I know we've got two, our parish council have organised in Kimber. How much are they being used? I mean, we're looking at putting out more EV charging points across the district, which you've canvassed really well. We've had, you know, myself, I've put forward some solutions. But looking at your presentation, you talked about some of the EV charging points being powered by solar panel. Is there a difference in charge to the user depending on how that is powered? Is there a difference in charge for user depending on the tariff, the energy tariff that's used? And is that then impacting the use of the EV charging points? And is all that going to be it being considered in your project moving forward for the best use of the money and EV charging points that we want to, so we can maximise the impact across the district? That was a long one, sorry. And thirdly, thinking about partnerships, are you doing any work or planning in the future to work with the Canal and River Trust? We've had a few residents in Kimber that are concerned about the inaccessibility of some of the part of the canal towpath in Kimber because it's so overgrown. Of course, the weather has gone in the favour of the weeds anyway, but I wonder about the volunteer sector with the Canal and River Trust in order to actually be able to do that. So I don't know if there's any work that maybe the council can do to try and help that, so that that's another form of green transport and walks that our residents will be able to use. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Yes, a good set of questions there. I agree with you in terms of sort of travel links around Kimber and Enville. You know, it can be sort of challenging to get around certain areas of the district. And alongside a lot of the climate change stuff we are working on, it's recognising how much power we have to influence certain things and when we need to get partners in. So, you know, key to that really sort of conversations with the county and what they might be able to bring to the table around that. The green active travel stuff in Kimber, I can let you have details of that. That was through the Kimber Eco Action Collective. And I think the parish council as well bid into it as well, just for some. I can check the details and send that to you if that's okay. Oh, sorry.
Was that the walking route from Kimber Edge down to the village centre?
That does ring a bell. I'd have to double check. Because we had 21 projects a year or so ago, so I can check through the details of that to let you know what exactly that was spent on. Yes, in terms of the EV tariffs and stuff like that, obviously we have a handle on how well the EV is being used on this site and what we're charging around that. It's obviously a bit of a balance with sort of other landowners and stuff, and you know, there is a bit of a sort of hidden affordability issue here, really, in that, you know, just as when you're going to buy petrol for your car every day, every station's got a very different price and you know the best places to go to. And I think what we're trying to address with the county council bid is trying to make it as equitable as we can for our residents there and offer a cheap that will help our residents in that respect. So that is all being built into the modelling that the county are doing and where we're going to get best bang for our buck, really. The final point around the Canals and River Trust, we do have a good working relationship with them operationally. We know the people to speak to, so to speak. You know, we're happy to support projects that they do where we can, really. I mean, obviously, you know, they have their own resource issues and what they can and can't do out on the site. But where we can work together, obviously we will. I hope that's answered your questions, and I'll send you some details over of where the climate price funding went in, if that's okay. Thank you.
Councillor
Thank you.
Cope. Councillor Cope, did you indicate? I've got you on the list. I will get you. Councillor Cope.
What I want to talk about, a few years ago, about 3 years ago, there was an article in the Express and Star, and it was about which authorities across the West Midlands were producing the most renewable energy. We came out top on that, and that was down to the 2 wind turbines at Rodbaston. Obviously, things have evolved since then, but we had that presentation earlier on with West Midlands Interchange. They were saying they would be putting a lot of renewable energy into the grid. I'm hoping that ROF Featherstone, when that site comes through with St Francis Group, that they will also be putting all this in. So where I'm leading to with this, together with the battery farms we've just recently approved, can we have an annual audit on how much renewable energy we're producing in this district? Because I think it looks good on our CV, and also when we're accused of not doing enough renewable energy. So could we do an audit on that as it comes through? Because that's about how much megawatts we're actually putting into the grid. And it all looks good on our CV. So if we could look at doing that, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I think what we could do, we could look in terms of that and how that's monitored and managed. I think from so obviously there are new infrastructure pieces of kit and infrastructure from a renewable point of view coming on board all the time. Someone would hope that that would be increasing. Where we stand with other people and whether they're stealing the march over us or not is also would be interesting to see. I'm not sure whether that is actually audited externally, but leave that one with us and we'll have a look and we'll get back to you. But it would be certainly would be an interesting conversation to have.
Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you. So there's been a lot of talk about the built infrastructure, but I'm also interested to see what is in hand regarding the non-built landscape and making it accessible for people generally, for green spaces. There's been quite a lot of talk about planting a lot of trees. I'm always in favour of more trees, the right combination, the right place. But we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that a healthy landscape is made up of different habitats, including heathland and wetlands, etc. So is all of that being factored in? It can't all just be 100% towards planting trees. And also, just on a slightly different topic, so on the idea of being more green in refuse, reduce, refill, recycle, does the council have a policy of trying to repair its kit before it throws it out and replaces it? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Yes, in terms of sort of land management and stuff, I agree with you. There's an opportunity to look at what we do across the board, not just in terms of tree planting. And that's part of what we're doing with through Biodiversity Net Gain, the work I'm doing with the ecologist, our senior ecologist, Matt. At the moment, we're sort of looking at opportunities on our local nature reserves across the district, trying to understand what we're doing there and what we can do better. And we're also extending that out to other sites, that might be applicable to. And I know Matt's got a long list of sites across the district where he's trying to understand how we're managing them now, and what we can do better in the future, really. Going on to your second point around sort of repair of kit and stuff, I can only really speak for what we do down in street scene down at the depot, but we obviously have a lot of running repairs for the kit that we use down there. And it's fair to say we get as best use out of the kit that we can before we eventually have to replace it. So we always look to sort of repair the stuff where we can and inevitably replace when we have to, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Councillor Robert Duncan.
Thank you. One of the things on your slide I noticed was the Essington Great Worley Canal Walk. Can you give me some more idea of what intentions you would have for that particular walk, which is very close to our heart friend Chesney from Great Worley?
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Well, again, the Worley Essington Canal is local nature reserve, completely in the ownership of South Staffordshire Council. From the one end, it sort of goes down into Bloxwich and Walsall, and then upwards past Strawberry Lane Cemetery and into the villages of Chesley Nay, Great Worley and beyond. I think, as a transport link, it obviously runs parallel to the A34, so there's quite an opportunity there for us to sort of try and, as a great wish list, to try and move some of that traffic from there onto the Worley Essington Canal. I haven't been to site for a while. What we'd be looking to do with, again, some consultants to master plan the area for us is understanding what opportunities there are to improve the linkages into the village, make the site more attractive to use for residents, and your general sort of infrastructure and repairs, really. I'm also mindful that it's a valuable wildlife resource as well. I've not seen any myself, but I know the sightings of water voles down there, which are nationally sort of scarce species. So it's understanding how residents are using it at the minute, what we can do to improve it, how we can encourage more residents on there, and how we can make best use of the resource we've got, really. But as that detail comes through in a master plan, really, we'll obviously be bringing that to members at first opportunity.
Just further to that, I can assure you that that particular stretch is widely used by the residents, not just of Chesley and Great Worley, but lots of people there, believe it or not, they come for the day out just to experience what they've heard about it. So it is very widely used, and as long as foot can maintain sort of, families walking down there, the few cyclists, the cyclists that we get down there, then that will be great. And by the way, there is quite a lot of wildlife around there. In fact, you do get the occasional deer, small herds around that sort of area. So it is an abundance of wildlife around there.
Councillor Andy Adams.
Thank you, Chair. Ryan, just a quick one. Earlier on in your presentation, you mentioned the number of vehicles in the fleet. How many have we actually? I'm assuming they're probably all on a lease contract, and the lease contracts come to an end in a given time. Is it staggered that we've got the vehicles that are on leases, and what's the expectancy that they will be actually coming to renewal status? The reason why I ask that is because I'm sure our 151 officer will be looking at this and paying attention, saying, well, is this a big risk? Because there could be significant changes, as you mentioned, hydrogen a little further down the road. The other thing I want to ask a question, and I don't know the answer to this, which is more carbon reductor, which reduces the carbon print more, a deciduous tree or an evergreen tree? The reason why they come both with an issue. The evergreen tree doesn't need to have all the leaves gathered up. We in Penkridge, outside the Hailing Dean, have got an awful lot of trees. They're all deciduous, and we end up having to spend copious amounts of time gathering all those leaves up, and probably money and a carbon footprint in so doing. That's the second question. And something that maybe we as a district council need to look at regularly. In our house, we have got three little containers. The one is we put the stuff that goes into the blue bin. The other one we put what goes into the paper bin. And then the other one is what can go into the grey bin. Now, invariably, for example, Walker's crisps, they're big bag. You can't put that into a recycle. You have to put it into the. We need, as a district council, to be asking these manufacturers and saying to them, hey, come on, why can't you put it into more recyclable plastics or whatever it is? Finally, a question for you, Ryan. The EV charging that we've got, what's the rating that they're actually charging at? Because you'll know that, and I am no expert on this, but I understand there's the quick charge and then there's a lower one. And there must presumably be a different costing If, say, if I came along with my EV car and I wanted to charge it up, and I was pretty low and it was a quick charge, how much would it cost me? Have we advertised this to anybody, so that people know that if they come here, they can then pop into the cafe, have a cup of coffee, come and have a look at the library, and do all those other things. It's a multifaceted thing that we can actually do there.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Some good questions there. In terms of our own vehicle replacement, we have a street scene fleet replacement strategy, which I think was for a 5-year period. We didn't want to be tied into a longer period at the moment due to, at the time, the uncertainty around EV vehicles coming in and the potential cost on the service. So we're all right for the next few years, but obviously we'll be bringing a new strategy sort of forward as part of our RPP and sort of planning going forward. So it's currently on a 5-year basis for the vehicle replacement. Yes, yeah. Yes, yeah. Mark might be able to offer more advice on what BIFRA are doing in terms of their vehicle replacement and also the recycling question. In terms of trees, deciduous or broadleaf, I've never been asked that one before, and I wouldn't pretend to know the answer. Yeah. No, you're right, you're right. I mean, I just take the view it's good to plant any tree, really. Yeah, so, but I can certainly look into that one, yeah, for my own interest and have an answer there. In terms of the EV charging, that would get down to the sort of specifics of each site, really. What the county might be doing, for instance, is offering sort of longer term charging for residents at lower tariffs, which so they can be there overnight, say. Whereas we might, on a site like Bagwich or something, try and maximise the charging there, so people who are just coming for a couple of hours can get a good charge on the vehicle. So it will vary really depending on the site. I couldn't tell you, to be honest. I'd have to check with our facility side on what we've got here. I know there's a couple of options, to be honest, depending which side of the car park you go on. And if it's okay, I'll leave Mark to answer the questions on their waste contract.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Well, no, not our own directly owned fleet. The BIFRA contract currently uses 18 vehicles to deliver the service, so that's a big chunk of carbon we need to look at. As part of the 3-year extension, the fleet that's been bought in supports that current collection methodology, which runs until March 2025. Again, depending on housing growth within the district, will dictate the number of vehicles which are used on that fleet. And again, after last week's announcements, we were obviously gearing up for some significant changes regarding waste. That's again back up in the air. We've shortly got to make decisions what we do regarding our waste collection contract, which will again dictate what fleet we use, which again will be dictated by what materials we have to collect and how we collect them. So it's not an ideal scenario, and again we're waiting on additional details from DEFRA now regarding waste and resources strategy and follow-ups from the Prime Minister's announcement last week. So we're in limbo, but we've got to have a plan. We've got to collect the waste. So the fleet may increase, but what type of fleet we use again will be dictated by what we've got to collect and what containers we're using. Again, that filters into the extended producer responsibility element of the waste and resources strategy and what materials government are going to stipulate we have to collect. Again, the EPR announcements have been pushed back till 2025, so that would basically see those people who produce waste, a section of their money would be taken and put to councils and other bodies that have to deal with that waste. But again, at the moment, that's all been put on hold. We've been told October 2025, but again, whether that even happens now. So not an easy scenario to navigate, but again, we've got to make some decisions what we do going forward.
Councillor Brindley.
Thank you, Councillor Brindle. Good questions. Jackie's just reliably informed me that it's 40 pence here on the tariff. So there you go. Regarding the tree planting opportunity you point out, we can certainly look to work with the landowner there. I mean, obviously we need, is it highways? Okay, I can certainly have a look at that one. Yes, and in terms of the industrial estates, that's certainly what we'd like to do. It's a bit of an aspiration really to sort of offer EV charging for visitors to the district at these industrial estates really. And, you know, we've got a role really as a community leader to make it easier for our tenants and sort of to get on board with this really. So that is certainly something we'll be looking at. Further details will be coming forward in terms of procurement and what we look to do. We'll be putting that to members in due course. Thank you.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, that is actually the last person on my list. Sorry, one moment. Sorry, Councillor Perry wants to make a few comments.
If I could just make a couple of comments. Thank you for all your interest in this big topic, which it is. I'm sure you've got a full agenda, Ryan, for the panel that will be discussing climate change, because from the questions that have been posed this evening, thank you for the presentation. This tonight was, ladies and gentlemen, an update of where we are at as we speak. So you've got a lot of work to do, those that are on the panel. Those that aren't on the panel, I'm sure any information you would wish to give to officers, Ryan or Mark, they can discuss in the meetings, and hopefully we'll be on the right road to the reduction in overall scheme. So I just wanted to make that point, that it is tonight's this tonight was just about where we are at as we speak now, and there's a lot of work still to do. So thank you all for your questions, and I'll now hand you back over to the chairman. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Can I also thank Ryan very much for not just giving the presentation, but for taking all those questions on board and giving your answers. Where he can't give you an answer, he'll come back with an answer. Having completed the questions, does anybody want to debate this? No? Okay. Well, there's a recommendation at item 7.1. Members note the report progress and achievements made during 2022-23 and the proposals for 23-24. Are we all content with that? Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 6, the work programme. Councillor Mrs. Field. I'm panicking there. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. I won't keep you long, members. This is just the normal work programme report, really, just to make sure that members have oversight of what's coming to this committee. As members will know, there were a couple of items that were originally scheduled for tonight's meeting. They have had to be deferred because we haven't received the information necessary to bring those forward. But hopefully they will come to your next meeting. The only other change at the moment that I'm aware of is, unfortunately, the county highways potholes issue can't be heard at the November meeting now due to a diary clash, but I'm looking to either reschedule that to the January or March meeting. Once that's confirmed, obviously, I'll update members at the next meeting.
Thank you for that. Do we have any questions? We don't have any. Oh, Councillor Steele.
If we put the potholes back to January, there'll be twice as many.
When it comes to potholes, I'm extremely sensitive. Okay. There is a recommendation at 7, and that is that members note the report. Are we all content with that? Thank you. Well, having completed the agenda items, can I thank you for your attendance and contributions? And at 7:45, I formally close the meeting.